Okay, this is my review of Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is normally where I hold up the book, but it didn't come in time, so I read it online. I'm really glad I ordered that special edition version that didn't even come on the release date. I will be sure to treasure it. Katabasis is a fantasy book about two graduate students, Alice and Peter, who are at Cambridge studying analytic magic. After their academic advisor, Jacob Grimes, dies, they travel to Hell to rescue him. Alice is our main point of view character, so her motivations for wanting to rescue the professor are stated at the beginning as being based on success in academia. She doesn't think she'll be able to get a job in academia without a recommendation letter from Professor Grimes. This is our first blunt metaphor. She is underprivileged compared to Peter, so she feels her only way to succeed is with Professor Grimes' help. Alice is literally willing to die for the chance of success, but she also blames herself for Grimes' death. Magic in the universe is based on channeling through pentagrams drawn using chalk. As Professor Grimes thought he was above doing this grunt work, Alice was the one drawing the pentagrams for his experiments, and she is an overworked, tired graduate student, so she makes a mistake on one of the symbols, and the mistake leads to Grimes' death. She manages to get away with this because the professor does not credit or make records of the students helping him with his experiments. Peter, Professor Grimes' other graduate student, finds her attempting to travel to Hell and insists he joins her. We aren't sure of Peter's motivations for this yet, but Peter and Alice are hinted to have some sort of history with each other. When they arrive in Hell, they reach the waiting area, the Fields of Asphodel, where the souls, called Shades, wait to be reincarnated. Here he meets some Shades who are former Professor Grimes students, who died indirectly due to his negligence. The students are shown to still be fawning over Grimes and refuse to move on because they are scared they will be reincarnated as poor people, or worse, dumb people who can't be magicians. Oh, the horror. Oh, to not be clever, one of them wailed. They literally think that it's better to be dead than not be an academic, even though being an academic is what killed them. It is a parallel to Alice and Peter, who are willing to kill themselves if it means they can succeed in academia. From here on out, it's not going to get any less unsubtle. The book has a message. Academia is hell. And it will approach that message in the least nuanced, most obvious way possible. They pass through the waiting area to the first level of Hell. They theorize that Hell adapts to the traveler. So Hell's a campus because Grimes was only interested in Cambridge. The world building, Katabasis, is messy. There are so many references to different mythologies and philosophers and writers and literary depictions of hell. The Divine Comedy, the Wasteland, Chinese mythology, Christian mythology, Egyptian gods, the Hindu god Yama, and Greek and Roman gods, obviously. So many things are referenced that it ends up feeling indistinct and jumbled. Any unique features of Kuang's own imaginings of hell are completely lost, as it's just an amalgamation of everything she's ever read. She just wanted to reference as much stuff as possible. This could be the tagline for the book, honestly. The first circle of hell is Pride. Pride is a university library. We have a long description of how ornate and lovely the library is, and then Alice thinks, how could somewhere so lovely be hell? There's no way. Kuang has a preoccupation with describing the beauty of universities and libraries and the city of Oxford or Cambridge. I think this is kind of the contradiction of dark academia books in general. It's clear that R.F. Kuang doesn't like the elitism of university institutions, but she does seem to like the exclusivity, the pomp, the ceremony, and the materialism. And obviously, the exclusivity goes hand in hand with the elitism. Anyway, the library isn't lovely. It's full of panicking, despondent students having mental breakdowns. In order to leave Pride, they have to endlessly write essays on an impossibly vague topic, defining the good. They meet a shade, George, a former academic. He explains that if the shades stop writing anything useful, they begin to bronze, and they turn into a bronze statue who is put on a pedestal. I wonder what she's getting at there. Could this be a critique of academic institutions valorizing washed-up academics? It's a very subtle metaphor. There's a lot of referential jokes in this chapter. George explains how all these people are put into the circle of hell for being prideful, and it's stuff like, he said he taught at Oxford when he taught at Oxford Brookes. You might not get this joke if you're not British, but it's very overdone. Or he claims to be a communist, but he's never read Das Kapital. I think sometimes if you hear a joke you don't understand, you presume it's funny, but went over your head. I understood a fair amount of the jokes in this chapter, and they weren't funny. The book is never particularly funny, though it is trying to be. Also, the dialogue is quite weird. Kuang spent a lot of time in England because she studied at Oxford, and as such there is a mix of American and British language that I didn't love. I think when Americans try to use British vernacular, it tends to sound a little bit fuddy-duddy. They write British people in their 20s as if they were of retirement age. Lots of young people saying lovely all the time and talking about tea and being fussy. It gives the impression of someone who lived in England but didn't go outside Oxford very much and maybe picked up their British slang from Harry Potter and the Great British Bake Off and old episodes of Doctor Who. After this, they leave Pride without much trouble. Navigating your way through hell seems very simple for most of this book. They end up camping out for the night, or whatever the equivalent of night is in hell. Despite both of them saying they were incredibly prepared for this journey to hell, they only brought one blanket, so they have to share. It's very AO3. The only food they brought is lembas bread. This is pretty much the only literary reference in the book that isn't explained, so I thought, oh, it's a fun little reference to the elf bread in Lord of the Rings, where you only need to have one bite and you're full for hours. But it's mentioned constantly in the book. They must say lembas bread about 200 times. It started to get on my nerves. The chapters in hell are interspersed with flashbacks back to Alice's time at university, and also these in-universe essays that are scattered throughout the book. They seem like an interesting writing exercise if you're planning on drafting your novel, but they are just exposition dumps in the book. The next level of hell, Desire, is a student center. This chapter starts with a flashback to Alice's perspective on her time at university and her view of desire. Alice thinks she doesn't feel desire or is able to resist it. All the magic students performatively deny themselves basic human wants and needs in order to focus on studying and to appear like they are above primitive things like needing food or wanting to watch TV or whatever. Alice says she often wouldn't eat because she was so lost in studying and she kind of got a kick out of this. The feeling of hunger and the feeling of denying herself something. And then they come to the desire floor of hell, and it's all these shades performing the same action over and over again obsessively. Some of the things the shades are doing are explicitly sexual, but not always. Like the first shade she observes is obsessively smelling a book. Do you get it? Do you get the point we're making? It's a very obvious setup to a lesson on how Alice's own obsession with academia and success and Grimes himself is an unhealthy, obsessive desire just like these people felt. At this point in the book, it feels less like Dante and more like A Christmas Carol. All the different levels are meant to parallel Alice and maybe teach her some sort of lesson in a similar way to the ghosts in A Christmas Carol. There is also a flashback in the middle of the chapter to her talking to Grimes, who directly asks her what she desires, and she says success. And she thinks of the rush she felt when she watched a crowd of people watch Grimes' speeches with rapt attention. Alice, as a character, is very aware of the prejudice she faces and the prejudice that is directed towards her, but very unaware of her own prejudices. I think these are realistic traits, but Alice is just so unlikable, elitist, and deeply misogynistic. And these are presented as obviously bad traits that she needs to overcome, but it does make her very tiring to read. Because while a main character doesn't need to be likable, they do kind of need to be interesting. She's a cliche of an overachiever, but she's also weak-willed and humorless, and just a conduit for the messaging of the book. Grimes as a character is like cartoonishly evil. He took credit for Alice's and other students' work. He practiced magic on Alice by giving her an experimental pentagram that means she can't forget. He tattoos it on her. It's got shades of that Nixium cult that branded women. Alice's reaction to him is, I think, badly written. She knows all his flaws, but thinks he's just so talented that it's fine. And I know what Kuang is doing. It's commentary about how talented men get away with abuse because they are geniuses. Alice knew very well, because this wasn't her first conference and she heard it all before by now. Grimes was evil, Grimes was toxic, blah blah blah. Some contrarian part of her soul was indeed proud to be associated with such a notorious advisor. Everyone else was so boring. Professor Grimes at least had some personality. So she's saying what if he abuses his students and takes credit for their work and is indirectly leading to their death through negligence? Alice, in my opinion, comes across as being unrealistically aware of Grimes's flaws. I think she should almost not acknowledge how awful he is to her, but instead it comes off as her knowing how evil and honestly incompetent he is, but just not caring. Alice's opinions on Grimes are just incredibly inconsistent throughout the book, from page to page, and not in a way that felt intentional. And this is another case of everything needing to be spelled out for you. We can't have nuance or grey area or creeping abuse. It needs to be Professor Grimes is doing Frankenstein experiments on his students, torturing cats to death and stealing human organs from corpses, because we cannot misunderstand the messaging of the book. After they leave Desire, Peter and Alice have this conversation where they fondly talk about how evil Grimes was and how he would throw things at them and make them help with his Dr. Frankenstein experiments, but how it was all worth it for some reason. They both seem to think he's a terrible teacher. What are they getting from this? What a tyrant. But he was our tyrant. Yeah, I mean, we're in hell because of him. For him. Right. Everything feels like R.F. Kuang is elbowing you in the ribs, going, "Do you get it? Do you get it?" Alice talks about how they were both foot soldiers and Grimes was their general, and then on the next page, she's reading All Quiet on the Western Front. Do you get it? After this conversation between Alice and Peter, she feels like they've bonded a little, and Alice gets kind of misty-eyed about how good-looking Peter is and the effect that talking to him has on her. But then she notices his bag is open and sees he has some papers in there that she hasn't seen before. The papers are research notes about equivalent exchange, a spell to exchange one person's life to bring back someone from the dead. And as you can't exchange your own life in equivalent exchange, she draws the conclusion that Peter is going to kill her to bring back Grimes. This is a pretty easy conclusion to jump to, as he has left these notes lying around. It felt like a piece of environmental storytelling from a video game. I'm imagining it like highlighted with like a subtitle, "Pick me up." And also it's an easy conclusion to jump to because he has written Grimes' name on the notes, and "if Alice," with a question mark and a bunch of underlines. This obviously happens for plot convenience. If you are planning to murder her, why leave around this smoking gun? And if you're not planning to murder her, don't leave something around that could lead to a sitcom level misunderstanding like this. There's a flashback after this to Alice's view of Peter at the university. They worked together, they were friends, but Peter was often aloof towards her and eventually stopped acknowledging her altogether. You get a character profile of him secondhand from Alice, but all her recollections of him in the past and her thoughts about him are more interesting than his character in the present in the story. The way she psychoanalyzes him makes him seem more interesting than he is. Alice is obviously very distrusting of Peter after this. They now travel to Greed. They meet the Weaver Girl, who is a character from the Chinese myth of the cowherd and the Weaver Girl. It's probably the most famous Chinese myth, or at least one of them. It's about two doomed lovers who can only meet one night a year. They even have a holiday to celebrate it. They also have one in Japan. It's called Tanabata. It's fun. You write wishes on trees and they have like wind chimes. I probably have some pictures of it. But don't worry if you don't know the story. It's exhaustively explained in the book. The Weaver Girl says she will perform a test on Alice and Peter. She separates them and gives them both a choice of two apples. If they both choose the red apple, she will guide them through hell. If one chooses the red and one chooses the green, she will guide whoever chooses the green apple through hell, but capture the one who chooses the red apple. It's a test of trust, but logically, why would Alice ever choose the green apple? Like, if she trusts Peter, choose the red apple. If she doesn't trust Peter, it's because he's plotting against her. But the plot involves him needing her body. So why would he sacrifice her and leave her behind? Either way, he's going to need her there. She's not using her brain on this one because she chooses green. But she and Peter still manage to escape, but he is furious, obviously. They manage to escape, but are attacked by these bone constructs that look like dogs, and then are rescued by Elsbeth. Elsbeth is a shade who is living on a boat on the River Leith. She invites them to travel with her, and as the river encircles all the levels of hell, she can take them wherever they want to go. They do not mention to her that they are there to rescue Grimes because she is a former Grimes student who committed suicide due to stress and who rightly hates him. She talks about how awful a teacher he was, that he is a washed-up has-been who steals from his students and hasn't published anything of worth for decades, which has already been made clear from everything we know about him up to this point, but Alice is just like mentally blocking her ears and saying la 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 la. Elsbeth explains the origins of the bone constructs. They are made by a magician couple, the Kripkes, who killed themselves to go to hell in order to perform the ultimate magic trick, going to hell and coming back from the dead. Instead, they've gone insane trying to leave and kill all hell's living visitors. It's been established that you can visit hell as a living person, like Alice and Peter. It's possible, but difficult to leave, but if you die and are there as a shade, it's, as far as they know, impossible to leave. But Elsbeth thinks she has figured out a way to do it. She tells them that she is planning to escape using a dialethea. A dialethea is some Deus Ex Machina device. Once Elsbeth is out of earshot, Alice convinces Peter to backstab her, to get the device for themselves, to rescue washed up, useless, abusive Professor Grimes. When they try and execute their plan to trick her using a logic puzzle, she throws them off her boat and they have to walk their way through Greed. They just kind of sailed past Wrath. Peter at this point is like, okay, we need to go our separate ways. You don't trust me. This is not working out. He tries to walk away, but he can't as they are both going around in circles. Peter starts to leave a Hansel and Gretel trail of, you guessed it, lembas bread. They walk forward but loop back around to the start of the bread trail, and they realize they are in a trap set up by the Kripkes, which they call an MC Escher trap. Now, this is a good example of how references work in Katabasis. Most people probably know who MC Escher is and what his artwork looks like, and if you don't know who he is, it shouldn't be important in the context of the book. It should just be explained what's happening. Alice and Peter are trapped in an illusion where they are walking up a set of stairs that just never ends and loops back around. For an example of this kind of explanation with the exact same concept, the movie Inception. If you haven't seen it, you probably have. It's set in a world where you can enter people's dreams, and at one point a character who is a dream architect explains the paradox of an infinite staircase, the Penrose Stairs. Is a reference to this drawing that I'll put on screen by Oscar Rudesvard, which is a drawing of an impossible staircase that goes up and down but also connects in a loop. It influenced the M.C. Escher drawing, Ascending and Descending, which I think is what you're supposed to imagine the trap is. In Inception, it is not important that you know who either of these people are. It's important that you understand the concept of an infinite staircase. And if you get the reference to the Penrose Stairs, well, that adds another layer. You feel like you know something, or it's something you can look up afterwards and learn something for yourself. But in Katabasis, the reference has to be explained so you realize that R.F. Kuang knows something that you don't. There's a little description of who M.C. Escher was. M.C. Escher was a Dutch artist well known in the mid-20th century for his drawings of optical illusions, etc. It's like the start of his Wikipedia page. I feel like if Kuang wanted to reference Shakespeare, she would not have a dying character say, "and the rest is silence," and expect the reader to know the reference to Hamlet, or not know the reference to Hamlet, but interpret their own meaning from the quote, from how it's used in the context of the book, or maybe Google it afterwards. She would have someone say, "and the rest is silence," and then write, "William Shakespeare was a playwright and poet born in the 16th century." I find it quite condescending. There is an assumption that you won't know who M.C. Escher is, or Dante, or Orpheus, and a lot of the plot is built around references being explained to you. Or it is just characters taking it in turns to explain things to each other for the reader's benefit. Alice saying to Peter, "Do you know the liar's paradox?" Peter saying, "Yes, I do, but why don't you just explain it to me?" Alice, "Do you know the metaphor of the boiling frog?" "Yes, but let me explain it again." There was this Goodreads interview with R.F. Kuang that I read before reading Katabasis, which rubbed me the wrong way a bit because of what it said. Keep your phone or laptop handy. Kuang folds in fascinating bits of mythology, history, philosophy, and literature from various world traditions, and you're going to want to look some of this stuff up. I thought, oh, that's a little bit condescending to the reader to think that the references in the book will go over their heads. But reading the book, this makes even less sense because every reference is either a complete throwaway or it is so exhaustively explained to put you off looking it up. They try and find a flaw in the magic in order to escape, but Alice is unable to focus her mind on the problem. There came a point with almost every research project where you understood it was time to stop trying, that all the time and effort sunk into a once hopeful hypothesis were simply leading nowhere. Get it? Like the staircase. They are trapped, and then they get into a fight because Peter knows that journeying to hell to get Grimes was a fool's errand, and accuses Alice of doing this because she's in love with Grimes. Alice tells him that it's not out of love for Grimes that she's trying to bring him back, but out of hatred, and that she killed him. We have a flashback to Alice's relationship with Grimes. He was attracted to her and came on to her, and when she turned him down, he started to punish her academically, discrediting her, belittling her work to the point that it starts to affect the way the other faculty and students treat her. Misogyny and internalized misogyny is obviously a theme of the book. Alice is very misogynistic. Her thoughts on feminism are, it was an embarrassing fad, a bygone fever of the 70s. Alice wanted nothing to do with it. Alice thinks Elsbeth is weak for committing suicide. It's an open secret that Grimes takes advantage of his female students. Everyone accuses women of sleeping around to get ahead. And then when Grimes tries to take advantage of Alice, she tells a female advisor, Helen. Helen says things like, "You knew this was going to happen," and "What are you now, a feminist?" And goes on a screed for a few pages about how women like Alice that have never known hardship and want it all and think the rules don't apply to them are ruining academia, and yells at Alice that nothing can be done and to forget anything ever happened. I don't have a problem with the depiction of sexism in the book, or the depiction of Helen, the advisor's mentality, which is accurate. Some women definitely think like that. I just don't think it's well written. I think the writing really fails to capture the subtlety of prejudice against women. Most sexism is not people coming out and just saying, "I hate women." It's not people making long, prepared sounding speeches like the one Helen makes, where she just kind of outwardly verbalizes every prejudice she holds and every problem she has with other women. Most prejudice is displayed through people's actions, in the undercurrent and implication of the things they are saying, or in things they don't say. It's insidious. Oftentimes in academic institutions, it's people pretending to care about your struggles or problems you're facing that offers this false hope that someone is going to help you, things are going to change, or something will be done. Everyone is so forward with their prejudices, and institutionalized prejudices like this are a lot of times they're under the surface and are just as bad, if not worse, than outright prejudices. There's something quite simple about somebody just saying, yeah, I hate women. I didn't enjoy the writing of this bit, but the conversation she has with Peter afterwards feels quite genuine. But she now explains her real motivation for bringing Grimes back. And it's kind of convoluted and odd and involves more explaining of concepts. She wants to bring Grimes back so she can lock him up and torture him in a puppet body. Why doesn't she just destroy his soul in hell so he can't be reincarnated? Can't she just do that? Why, if she hates him so much, is she endlessly and relentlessly defending him even in her own head? Now we have Alice's motivation for coming to hell. It's Peter's turn to explain his motivations. And he says he actually killed Grimes. They're taking it in turns. I am Spartacus style to take credit for Grimes' death. I killed Grimes. No, I killed Grimes. We get Peter's backstory, and his personality and motivations are pretty much just explained for you. It's very efficient. It only takes a few pages. Peter was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Peter had gone through life blithely assuming things would just fall in place precisely how he needed them. Peter was 5 when his genius became evident. Whatever illness Peter had was severe and chronic. We were also given this little story where all these children are invited to his birthday, and one of them lets slip that they are there out of pity. And it hurts his feelings, but he says to his parents, I'm too smart for all these kids, so I never want to see them again. No reading between the lines. This is why he's like this. These are his motivations. These are his hang-ups. This explains his aloofness, the fact that he missed classes, and how he still managed to succeed. He's privileged and a genius, but chronically ill. He avoids telling people he's ill by hiding behind his genius in order to avoid people's pity. Also, he's in love with Alice. His illness went into remission somewhat when he was at university, but eventually relapses, and he has to tell Grimes about his medical problems. And what Grimes says actually is kind of interesting. He tries to reassure Peter that many famous people with great minds had disabilities, and that actually they could use their disabilities to focus more on the mind. He's attempting to be reassuring to Peter of the fact that he can still be an academic, but also undermining the challenges he's facing and almost insinuating it's a blessing he will not be dragged down by trying to pursue physical pleasures because of the pain he's in. Now that was insidious. Peter's condition rapidly deteriorates and he has to have emergency surgery. He doesn't tell anybody at the school, and when he gets back, he finds out Grimes has stolen his research and wrote a paper without crediting Peter. In order to get back at Grimes, Peter sabotages his own theoretical research, not knowing Grimes is going to use it in an experiment, which leads to the mistake in the experiment, which leads to Grimes' death. Alice and Peter now understand what is going on with each other. They both kind of assume that the other person was succeeding with very little effort, and they realize, again, that Grimes is a washed-up fraud who pitted them against each other. But they didn't want to admit that he wasn't brilliant, as it means that they had been manipulated by a washed-up fraud. Another emotional revelation from Alice that she will just forget in a few pages. They are still trapped, but they manage to logic puzzle their way out. I think paradoxes are fun to explore in media, but the story of Katabasis isn't about a paradox, really. It just contains characters explaining paradoxes to each other in a way that makes you feel like you might as well be reading an article. Kuang clearly did a lot of research for this book and wants you to know and appreciate the sheer amount of research. But as anyone who has written an academic paper knows, sometimes you read a lot of stuff and it just ends up not being relevant, and you have to resist the urge to cram it in there so you don't feel like you wasted your time reading it. Peter sacrifices himself to the crypt keys, and Alice journeys through the level of hell, Cruelty, alone. She has given up on her search for Grimes and is kind of wishing for death. Eventually she comes across another shade called Gradus, who guides her to the 8th court of hell, the city of Dis. We are back on the hell as a campus metaphor after ignoring it for a while, and also back to looking for Grimes again. The shades in this level have committed some of the most grave sins, and in order to escape hell they must submit a dissertation as to why they should be freed. But Gradus says he has never heard of anyone being freed from hell after their dissertation is marked, so it is a fruitless exercise. Do you get it? Writing a dissertation is pointless and tedious, and hell is academia. She's taken to a room where a group of shades who are former professors sit around in a circle, quoting the Republic at each other and talking about methodology. After a while of listening, Alice thinks they cared so much, they argued so viciously, but couldn't they see it didn't matter, didn't even remotely register in the cosmic span of things, and this was the dumbest way possible to spend eternity? Do you get it? Do you get what she's saying about academia? R.F. Kuang is just making the same point over and over again, each time with less subtlety. Academia is hell, academia is tedious, elitist, repetitive, pointless, not worth throwing your life away for. We are going around in circles of Alice learning the same thing over and over, and the author making the same points. I feel like I'm trapped in that staircase. One of the Professor Shades invites Alice to join her citadel in the center of Dis. Alice is trapped but manages to escape. After wandering through hell, seemingly for months, she has another revelation. She needs to kill the Crypt Keys. She does this with some help from Gradus and manages to drag them into the River Leith, where they are washed free of their memories in order to be reincarnated. She thinks back on how she used to admire them, and it's another metaphor for how the pursuit of knowledge corrupted them. Elsbeth comes back to rescue Alice, and they talk, and Elsbeth forgives her. Alice is talking to Elsbeth about Grimes, but still defending him. Alice's view of Grimes is so inconsistent throughout the book. She wants to save him, but secretly wants to kill him, but really admires him, but then gives up on searching for him, but then starts searching for him again. It doesn't feel like this is a reflection of her, inner turmoil. It feels like inconsistent character development. Elsbeth asks where Peter is, and after Alice explains, Elsbeth has to tell her that Peter and Alice are in love. I didn't find this convincing because Alice is pretty awful and Peter is pretty bland, and they kind of fundamentally don't seem to really understand each other. At least at the moment Elsbeth met them. I'm not sure how she saw two people in love. Elsbeth explains that she has found the Dialethea, the plot device plant that can bring people back to life. The kind of convenient discovery of this MacGuffin plant is explained away in the text itself. She finds it in the crack between two boulders at the bank of the Leith. Can you imagine? No fanfare, no fairy rings, just growing there, impossibly, with nothing to announce itself. I think highlighting the fact that it is very convenient and anticlimactic does not undercut the fact that it is convenient and anticlimactic writing. The plant thing is lazy, but it could have at least been something that the story was centered around. Look, they don't spend any time discovering it or looking for it. This would have given Alice and Peter something to kind of achieve, I think, looking for this plant. Both Alice and Peter enter hell with this vague idea of what they intend to do there, but no plan or idea how they will do it. The ease with which they move through the first few circles of hell is really odd, considering how unprepared they seem. In spite of being geniuses, they don't realize you can't do magic in hell. They allegedly did all this research about hell and how to navigate it, but their plan seemed to be, let's just go to hell, check out the vibe, and see where things take us. Like they're interrailing through the underworld. Alice goes to King Yama, who rules hell, in order to bargain with him using the plant, and King Yama summons Professor Grimes' shade. When he appears, Alice finally sees him for what he is, an academic coasting on his former glory. Alice is just constantly relearning and seemingly randomly unlearning the same lesson over and over. It's really tedious. It was presumably so she can have this big revelation at the end. She can't work on herself as a character up until this point because R.F. Kuang wants it to be this big mic drop moment for her, I suppose, where she sacrifices Grimes and brings Peter back to life. The big moment of clarity she should have and kind of did have about a dozen times already. Alice and Peter declare their love to each other and return to Cambridge. I didn't like this. It felt like Kuang would rather be writing an essay or giving me a lecture. This style of writing is really detrimental to the characters and the storytelling and makes the writing feel like it's for teenagers or even children, where the most important point of the book is imparting some sort of lesson. There's an Ursula Le Guin essay, A Matter of Trust. I saw a TikToker referencing this when they were talking about Babel. I'll put a link in the description. I read the essay. I think it's still incredibly relevant to Kuang's writing in Katabasis. It's about the importance of trust in writing, trusting your story, but also trusting your reader. I don't feel like R.F. Kuang trusted me as a reader. Katabasis is written like she doesn't have faith in me to understand her references, to understand what the book means, and definitely not to draw my own conclusions about the meaning of the writing. It's like she's holding your hand so you don't trip off or wander off the path that she is taking in the book. I read some positive reviews before reading the book, saying that she had become a lot less blunt and obvious with her messaging. If that is the case, what is happening in those other books? They must have the subtlety of one of those anti-drug public information / service films. That's my review done. To finish this, I'll just say it's a hell of a book, and not in a good way.